Hi, it's Shoo here. I've written this book called A Certain Way, which is based on an old book from 1910 called The Science of Getting Rich by a guy called Wallace D. Wattles. Not a lot is really known about him, and yet he is probably one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century that nobody's really heard of. A lot of the self-help movement is actually built on that book. You may have come across a movie called The Secret, which is completely based on Wallace Wattles' book, although it doesn't actually tell you the secret. And there are all these ideas like the law of attraction, which sound great, but they don't quite tell you what it's all about. I think what has happened is over the years, people have thought, this is a brilliant thing here. And we can build this marketing wrapper around the outside of the book and sell it big time and make big bucks. And a lot of people have, by not actually telling what the secret is. And I think there's been a bit of misleading going on. So the law of attraction and manifestation, which is the latest manifestation of all of this, it kind of tells you, if you want something, believe it, and it's going to happen. And the more you believe it, the more it's going to happen. And so people kind of get this message and think, oh, I believe it's going to happen. And every day they're reciting affirmations and stuff. And that is not what it's about. Affirmations aren't enough. You need to get it in your head exactly what it is that you want. And then once it's clear, you just put it out there and move on. But then what you need to do is to put in place ways of receiving what it is that you have imagined and you have thought of. There is another big lesson that is told throughout all these self-help books and systems. It is the lesson of gratitude. And this is a really difficult one to grasp. And it's there in Wattles. And so for somebody like me, who's been brought up in sort of a certain time in the British culture, gratitude just means saying please and thank you. Thank you for what I've received. But Wattles is saying, no, be thankful for what you're about to receive. When I was at school, we used to say grace at the beginning of meals, and it was always for what we're about to receive. May the Lord make us truly thankful. And in fact, I'll tell you once I went to Guam, which is this tiny island in the middle of the Pacific, and it's where America's Day begins. And I was visiting schools, and I was at one school, and they had this fantastic lunchtime session in the staff room. Everybody had brought in food. There was this feast, basically, and it was just wonderful. I was the guest of honor, and the head teacher made a little speech and said, and now our guest of honor will say grace. And I just didn't know what to do. So I just said, well, for what we are about to receive, may the Lord make us truly thankful. And there was silence. And the head looked around and said, okay, short but sweet. Hey, chow down. So off they went. And I think what was expected really was a nice sort of thing. Thank you to the school, and thank you for the food, and thank you for all the people who've cooked it. Thank you for the airplane that brought me here and the airline that brought me here, and thank you for the hotel I'm staying at. And in that moment, I realised that gratitude went much wider. And I suppose this whole idea is American. It's come from a thing called the New Thought movement in the sort of mid 1800s, which I suppose in a way kind of married the teachings of Jesus with capitalism in a way, I suppose. Protestant work ethic, all that kind of thing. And I think that whole kind of New Thought philosophy has actually kind of spread out across America and has been kind of the engine of innovation and industry that has really made America this massive industrial country that it is. So I had to sort of come to terms with this idea of gratitude as being more than just saying thank you. It's an emotion, it's a feeling, it's a oneness. And I suppose, so So Wattles has this whole kind of theory sort of built upon ancient wisdom from the Bible to Buddha to the Hindu, all sorts of things. He was widely read and very interested in science too. And he was publishing right between Einstein's two great theories of relativity, the beginnings of quantum mechanics. He'd been living through field theory, magnetism, electricity, all sorts of stuff. It was a fantastic time to be a scientist. So much was going on. And he had this very prescient ideas of quantum physics, basically, which really came to a head about 20 years later with sort of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, Schrodinger's cat, all that kind of stuff. And he had this idea of the formless stuff, and which now pretty much relates to very current theories like causal set theory, which says basically everything goes down to causal elements, which are just the very basic stuff of stuff. Those elements then come together in sets, and those sets sort of essentially become particles. The particles come together, make atoms. The atoms come together, make molecules, and eventually make us. So in my adaptation of his book, which I've tried to make it more secular, taken the religion out of it and sort of brought the science up to date, I've had all these causal elements. The stuff that everything's made of is just there in some kind of container, an infinite container. It's too much for us to imagine. And that container is affecting what goes on with all this stuff inside. Make it more secular. I call that container nature. And nature can think, and can, by thinking, can focus on all this stuff and swirl it around and turn it eventually into its idea of a universe with stars and galaxies and planets and stuff like that, and then maybe millions of other planets we don't know. But on this little planet, it's thought, well, all right, we'll set this thing ticking. And so this sort of evolution has sort of come about and eventually evolved into us. And as far as we know, we are the only thinking things on the planet, and we seem to have this ability to imagine something, which may be really, really simple, like, oh, I want to draw a picture of a cat, there's two circles and little pointy ears, and to be able to do it and to manifest. It's the trouble with this word manifest. It's actually bringing about an idea into reality, which the marketers have so taken over this word manifestation that I've taken it completely out of the book. So in this great ongoing sort of evolving of the galaxy and the planets and everything, and eventually getting to us, we have been given this extraordinary gift of thought, and we become co-creators with nature, so we can think things and bring them about into reality. And that is what you're thankful for, this incredible gift that we've been given. And when you think about things that you've done, they start off with a tiny little ding. You go, I just had an idea. And that idea drops a tiny little seed into the formless stuff. And it can only grow while your attention is on it. And while you are really thinking about it and focusing, shaping the idea, making it clearer and clearer and clearer what it is you imagine, this thing will grow and grow and grow until it manifests and becomes the real thing. And once it's in reality, it's in reality. But the problem is that while it's coming, if you just forget about it, it'll fade away. If you're a scientist, you'll say, oh, I don't know anything about quantum physics. Well, that's fair enough. But quantum physics presents this great metaphor for how this all works. And quantum physics is reaching the point where it needs philosophy to answer some questions anyway. So what I imagine is happening is that tiny little thought, bing, is what I call a lattice seed. And what you're doing is building up this lattice shape of your idea in the formless stuff. And the more you pay attention to it and the more you refine the thought and focus the thought, then it sort of sends waves in there that solidifies it and builds on the lattice. I call it ripple forming, and ripples coming along, forming the thing into a more and more solid thing. And it's not just a solid thing like a camera or a phone. It's ideas, it's moments in time, all sorts of things that you're bringing together. And you might think it's going to come together like this, but it might actually come together from this direction or that direction, or from both directions at the same time in completely different ways to how you might have imagined. But it will come together. But the secret is, once you've got this idea, once you've put this thing out there into the formless stuff to be created, your intention must keep going. But it's not just saying, oh, I believe it's going to happen. The more I say it, the more I affirm it, it will happen. That is not the way it works. As the Quakers say, pray, then move your feet. Go and do something about it. So it's, once you have said, this is what I want, then you've got to work out how are you going to receive it. And I think that is really a different way of looking at it, rather than not how am I going to go out and get it, is how am I going to put things into place, how am I going to create channels to allow this thing to come to me. And those channels can be, start saving, maybe go and get a job, or go and talk to people, find the right people, go and read a book to find out what it is you need to know about this, search the internet. You've got to do all these things that allow this all to come together. And as Wattles says, it might require somebody to come from halfway around the world to connect your idea with their idea. We can do that online now, which is so much easier, and connect two ideas together, and you can then both create something of value. And that is kind of the essence of Wallace Wattles. And where he's talking about rich, he's really talking about a rich life. But nowadays, and in his time, to be able to do that, to be able to do everything that you want, to buy the books, to pay for university or whatever, you need money. That's the way it's all set up now. And so how do you get money? And he says it's about providing value. It's about giving more value than you charge for, essentially. So if you're an employee, you go that extra mile. If you're going to set up in business, you just give more value than you're asking people to pay you for. You just give more value, and that's how it works. Whereas now everything seems to have turned upside down, and with platforms and capitalism, now it's all about extracting value from everything, shoveling it upstairs to the very few people up at the top who are taking all the money out. And it's about getting away with stuff and just taking, whereas if you want to get rich, you want to give more than you ask for. And I think it speaks a lot to creative people. He says, don't have a competitive mindset, have a creative mindset. And that creativity isn't just about painting pretty pictures. It's about coming up with ideas to make things work in other people's and everybody's benefit. It's about, creativity is all about ideas, and it's not just about painting pictures or making sculptures. So this is particularly apposite at the moment, where we have this extraordinary creator economy out there on the internet, which is built up out of nowhere. And everybody's been creative and creating and stuff, but they're giving it all and not getting anything back. And the platforms are just extracting all the value, taking it all for free. Not only that, the audience, they're taking all their attention. They're extracting their attention and feeding them advertising. It's all gone wrong. So for me, this book is the start of a way out of this mess that we got ourselves into. And my version of it, the certain way, is my attempt. I will probably keep coming back to it and tweaking it, but it's my attempt to try and make this book from 1910 more understandable today by taking away all the archaic language and taking out all the religious stuff which doesn't quite resonate these days, and to put it in a more secular kind of way. And what I'm doing on these podcast things, video casts, is really getting it straight in my head. I'm not telling you this is how you do it. I don't want you to follow me. I'm just saying this works for me. It might work for you. And this is where the ideas have come from. And these are the ideas that I'm putting into practice in my life. It's not about being a guru. It's not about starting a religion or anything like that. It's just my ideas which I'm putting out there. Of course, I'd like you to buy the book, and you'll find all the links down below. You can get the PDF as well. Over the last 20 years or so, I feel I've come to really know Wallace Wattles, and I sometimes see him kind of breathing over my shoulder as I'm writing or rewriting something. And I would really like to have known him. He must have been a fascinating character. But as I say, very little is known about him. He was born on a farm and he did all sorts of jobs. I think he was involved in telegraphy, which was like, the internet of its time. And as I say, he was involved in the Methodist Church. And they kicked him out, asked him to leave because he was getting too interested in all these other religions and science and stuff, and was obviously preaching stuff which wasn't quite what they agreed with. And he began writing for New Thought magazines and things, and eventually wrote this book. And another one's The Science of Being Great and The Science of Being Healthy. No, something like that. But this is the one that really resonates with me. I came across it in a dark time for me, under a lot of pressure. It just resonated. And over the past 20 years or something, every now and then you kind of forget, don't you? And things start going wrong, and I go back to the book and it's, oh yeah, get back on the path. And then things start working out again. Wallace Wattles died very shortly after the book was published. And it would be fascinating to know what would have happened if he'd been around to really promote it. I'm sure we would have got to learn an awful lot more about him. But it kind of went out there into the world and had its extraordinary effect, even though you've probably never heard of him before. Thanks for watching, and I hope this makes some kind of sense. I'm making these videos really so that I can clarify my thoughts and sort of make them more understandable and clear. If you found something's really difficult in what I've been saying, let me know, and I'll see if I can find ways to sort of simplify and clarify this whole idea, which does come in various different sections. And I think that's the hard part of it. It comes in sections, and what Wattles did was absolutely brilliant. He had this axiomatic approach to the whole thing. He starts off with one little idea. Do you agree with that? And you say yes, good. Now let's build something on top. And if you agree with that, we build something on top of that again, chapter by chapter by chapter, building up this great idea. Get the book, find out. All the details are down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Until then, you take care now. Bye-bye.